Hello, U.S. history. Today I'm going to be talking about Japanese American internment. It's leading into what we're going to be doing after we get back from spring break. So you're going to need a piece of paper for a separate topic. And at the end of today's video, I'm going to tell you exactly how to get your attendance credit for today. So listen carefully and make sure you watch to the end. I'm going to go ahead and put your topic up for you. Hold on a second. There we go. Remember that you want to have your correct heading. Put your first and last name up in the right-hand corner. The topic is Japanese American internment. That goes on the top line. And then make sure also that your period number and today's date is on there. This is a recording, so I'm going to do it just normal pace. If you need anything repeated, you can stop, pause, whatever you need to do. Okay. So what's going to happen right after December 7th, 1941 is a reaction to the Pearl Harbor attack that happens. Number one is going to be a declaration of war on Japan by the United States. And at that point, we're going to be at war with all of the Axis powers, Japan, Italy, and Germany. There's a lot of fear on the West Coast because the West Coast felt that we could be the next potential attack target because they had attacked Hawaii. There was also a lot of paranoia of sabotage and spying. And unfortunately, it's going to be targeted at the Japanese American community. There's going to be an executive order that's issued a couple of months after the attack that's going to result in the incarceration of Japanese Americans. And what the order stated was anyone of Japanese ancestry. And of course, that included a lot of non-immigrants, people born in the United States who just happened to be racially Japanese. Didn't speak Japanese, never been to Japan, but yet they were targeted because of their race. A lot of the Japanese American businesses were targeted. You can see that this is actually downtown LA, and it's a grocery store that they worried would be targeted for vandalism because of the anti-Japanese feeling. And this was happening all over. For us in the Valley, it's going to be a very local issue because we had a very large population of Japanese family-owned farms, and a lot of the assembly centers for the evacuating the Japanese were located in the Valley, and I'll show you examples in a moment. So February 19th, 1942, this is, a couple months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt issues Executive Order 9066. And it says anyone of Japanese ancestry must be evacuated from this military zone, and I'll show you where that is exactly in a second. When you return from spring break, you're going to be seeing something called American Pastime. And it's about a family that is evacuated from Los Angeles, and they're moved out to the Utah desert. And it's basically two groups of people we're talking about. That the parents, in this case, are going to be Issei, and that means people born in Japan who were immigrants, usually as adults. But they also have two teenage sons, and those sons were born in Los Angeles in the United States. So people of that generation are called Nisei. They're of Japanese ancestry, but born in the United States and Americans. There was reaction, of course, to these internment orders. Many of the Japanese argued, hey, we're being targeted specifically because of our race. We haven't committed a crime. We haven't been found guilty of anything, but yet we're being stripped of our property and put in these camps. One of them was Fred Korematsu. He sued the United States government, saying that this order was unconstitutional, which clearly it is. But at the time, the Supreme Court ruled that it was a matter of national security and said that it was constitutional. Now, later, the U.S. government would apologize and reverse that decision, but at the time, the paranoia and fear was very high. Japanese were forced to leave their businesses, their homes, their farms, and go to assembly centers. That was the first stop. So, if we're talking about the valley, the Fresno Fairgrounds was the main assembly center in our valley. So, we're talking about, let's say there's a family with a peach farm or cherry farm or something in Fowler or Firebaugh or Kerman. Those people would have to leave their farms. Hopefully that they, had neighbors that would maybe work the farm for them, watch their property, but of course a lot of that stuff ended up being lost. Then they would move to an assembly center, and this is, if you've been to the Fresno Fair, right where the horse racing stand is. And the Japanese were actually housed in the stables there. So imagine you had to leave your house within 5 to 10 days, leave everything behind except one suitcase. And you were put in this assembly center, probably in a horse stall in the middle of the summer. So if you go there today, they have this plaque and they have a few photos, a nice memorial to it. But for years, of course, there was nothing there that marked the history. So it's really important that they are now recognizing this history. This is right outside the horse stand place. It's actually right near where they're giving the vaccinations now. So on this map, you see the area that's in pink here. That's called the military exclusion zone. So the order said that anyone of Japanese ancestry had to be removed from this zone and moved to one of the camps eventually. The camps, there's only two that are in California. Most of them were outside of California on purpose. And even as far away over here as Arkansas, there's two there. The one you're going to see in American Pastime is this one, Topaz in Utah, real place. And the the ones that are these are specifically way out in the desert, not near towns. Even the ones in California, Manzanar and Tule Lake, those are very remote desert areas. There's not much out there. But before you went to the camps, you went to an assembly center, and there's a lot more of those. And if you notice, the assembly centers are those small circles here, and it's basically right in our Central Valley because most of the Japanese American population in the United States lived in California. Actually, technically, most in Hawaii, but Hawaii was not a state yet. So California had probably about 200,000 to 300,000 Japanese living here, most in our valley, and many farming families. So would be the Fresno Assembly Center. And from there, you would be bussed out to one of these camps, Manzanar, Topaz, even out in Arkansas, wherever you ended up going. You were allowed to take one suitcase per person. And you notice this family kind of adapted by, stuffing as much into a suitcase as they could and trying to close it with belts there. Um, and so this is a pretty scary that this could happen in America. And these camps they're going to are not concentration camps, but they are internment camps, and they're surrounded by barbed wire and guards. So it's not as if they had no freedom; they couldn't leave. One of the things you'll see in American Pastime, because it's actually a movie, a kind of a baseball movie. This also is a real photo, and it's a little pixelated. Sorry for the quality, but you'll be seeing the original on the book I have in class anyway. These are members of the Fresno Japanese American Baseball League. There were very active Japanese baseball leagues before the war and after. This happens to be before the war. They are standing with Babe Ruth, a famous baseball player of the 1920s, in case you don't know, and also Lou Gehrig, probably the most two famous baseball players that ever lived. And they're doing an exhibition game in Fresno. I believe this is 1924, so this is a pretty long time before the war, but there's already a strong tradition of Japanese baseball. And the movie you're going to see is about a kid that plays baseball and ends up losing his scholarship because he has to go to the camp. So you'll see this photo. It's a famous one. If you know Coach Kyle, his grandfather was a baseball player. Sorry. There we go. So As a result of this, because the order came in 1942, the war is not going to end until 1945. So a lot of these people were there for up to 3 years. And we're talking about all age groups, children, teenagers, adults, older people. And a lot of those people lost their property, their farms, their homes, their savings. And for the kids, they lost school, just like happening during the pandemic. The teenagers you're going to see in the movie, one of them went into the army, but one had a baseball scholarship that he lost. So he lost his senior year of high school, like kind of what happened to us last year. In the 1980s, about 40 years after the end of the war, a lot of these families were compensated for their losses and they were given a formal apology by the US government. And some of them, like the older brother you'll see in the film when we get back, he enlists in the military and he's allowed to leave the camp to do that. But because he's Japanese American, he's only allowed to fight in the European area of the war against Hitler. They did not allow Japanese American soldiers to fight against the Japanese. There was too much paranoia about spying. You'll hear the 442nd Regimental Combat Team mentioned. They are Japanese American combat regiment. They are the most highly decorated regiment in US history and fought um, very valiantly against Hitler in Europe. At this point, go ahead and put end on this topic. And I'm going to tell you now how to get your attendance credit for today and your credit for today. You are going to go ahead and go back into Chrome. You're going to Google the name Fred Korematsu, and that's how you spell it right there. Once you do that, you're going to see the link to the Fred Korematsu Institute. Click on that and open it. This website web address, you're going to email to me. And if you don't know how to do that, you're going to go up here and copy, right click and copy, and paste it into an email and send it to me with obviously your name. So that is how you get your attendance credit, by sending me the web address for the Fred Korematsu Institute. Okay, and I will see you later.